Okay, well, welcome to everyone who's watching this on YouTube. And for those of us who are in the same Zoom meeting, we're going to be working on this project together. For those on YouTube, you are now part of a weekly stamp club and an amazing group of women that I am very, very proud to be part of. Today, we're going to do a one-sheet wonder. And this one-sheet wonder might be a little different than the typical one-sheet wonders that you've done. When I think of one-sheet wonders, I think of a piece of 12 by 12 designer series paper that gets cut into different shapes and sizes and then gets used to make different projects. That's not what we're going to do. We're actually going to take a blank piece of cardstock and create a one-sheet wonder. Before I flip the camera over and just start doing this, I want to give credit to the demonstrator who inspired me to share this kind of project. Her name is Carolyn Bosley, and she is a fellow North Carolina demonstrator. We have a really terrific group of demonstrators in North Carolina, and we meet on Facebook a lot. Every quarter now, we have a stamp along, which is an event where many of us get on and do lives on Facebook and share ideas. And Carolyn shared this one. So Carolyn, if you ever watch this, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I hope everybody who is either in the meeting now or will be watching this will enjoy it. And I'm going to flip my camera over. And here we go. So I am going to use the Flowing Flowers stamp set. And like many stamps, this is one that did not catch my eye the first time. The reason I ended up buying this, and Jane, if you watch this, I want to give you credit because Jane decided to order this stamp set and I was nosy and I needed to look and see what it looked like. So I did. And then I ordered it. Even though I have enough flowers, we all think we have enough flowers. These are gorgeous and the sentiments are perfect. So what are we going to do? We are going to start with a piece of cardstock. I'm going to use a piece of basic white, and this is just an 11 by an 8.5. That's all it is. And you're probably wondering why I have this sheet and what in the world these marks mean. This is the way that I'm going to help guide my stamping, but I'm going to tell you a couple of ways that you can do this. And I'm going to show you an example of where we're going, and then we're going to go there together. This is an example because I guarantee the one that I'm going to make now will not look like this. But this is where we're going. And we are going to do some stamping. And what I'm going to try and do is sort of concentrate and make sure that if you visualize a line going horizontally in the middle and a line going vertically in the middle, I want to make sure that I stamp on those two lines. And then I go a little bit beyond, but I leave white in the corners. Okay. So this is where we're heading. And a good way to make sure that you get there sort of kind of, again, everyone's going to look different, is you give yourself a little bit of a visual cue or clue as far as where that midpoint is. It doesn't need to be precise. So how can you do this? There are multiple ways. You could grab a ruler and at the 5.5 inch mark on the 11-inch side, you can make a little tick mark because you're going to erase it. You would flip that paper over and do the exact same thing and put a little tick mark right in the center point, which on the 11-inch side is going to be at 5.5. For the other two sides, this paper is 8.5 inches wide. So obviously that means that in the middle, you would put a little tick mark at 4.25. You'd flip your paper over and you do the exact same thing. That's one way to do it. The way that I have it here, it's just because I had some time to get this kind of prepped, is I've got a piece of construction paper that for some reason is a little bit bigger than 8.5 by 11. And all I did on that construction paper is I drew some really heavy lines so that I could visually see about where the center is. Another way that you can do this is in some of the designer series paper packages, there are pieces of kind of cardboard or really hard cardstock that is in the package. And that's a really nice size. And just put a line down at 6 inches, another line at 6 inches, you know, on the height and the width. And then you're going to get your cross hatches where you can put your paper. And yet another way, stick some washi tape down on your surface. Just put a big old piece down and then find where it crosses, put another piece down, and you're going to get that visual X. But however you do it, just have a way that you can approximate. This is nothing that has to be exact, believe me. Just believe me on this. What I have done is I've put some of the stamps. I'm going to use 3 of the flower stamps that are in the Flowering Flower stamp set. And I have them on acrylic blocks. Acrylic blocks are a little foreign to me because usually I use a stamparatus. And in this kind of design, you definitely are going to get better results and quicker results if you use acrylic blocks. And then I've picked 3 colors that I thought worked together well. You don't need 3. You could do monochromatic. You can do as many colors as make you happy. And I'm going to start with the stamp on the right. And I'm going to be using polished pink for this one. And the reason I'm going to start with this stamp is just because it's kind of long and it's going to give me a good sort of placement on those visual lines as I'm creating this background. And I'm not going to overthink this. That's one of the beauties of this kind of stamping is you've got a lot of freedom when you do it. So I'm just going to ink up these stamps or this stamp. And I do have a piece of, in my case, just a piece of paper behind the piece that I'm going to be stamping on. And that way, if I want to go off the edge a little bit, I can do that without getting ink on my background here. And like I said, I'm not going to overthink this. This is about in the middle. That looks fine. I'm going to ink up the same stamp. I'm going to make sure that I am stamping so that each area doesn't have to be up or down. There's no right or wrong way of really visualizing how these images are on the page. And for me, flowers do that well because you can usually take a flower stamp and have it in different orientations, and it's not going to look like it's upside down or right side up. You can move it in many different directions and it will work fine. And I'm just going to stamp this one more time. And I'm going to try and orient it a little differently each time that I do this. And just put that down. So what I've done here, and I did this intentionally, is I don't really need to look at these lines anymore because I can kind of see where my vertical is going to be. I don't really need to look at these 2 lines either because I can see where that horizontal is going to be. So by putting those 4 images on the page, I've created boundaries for myself and I don't need to get really caught up in where I'm going to place the rest of the images. The next one that I'm going to use is the large flower stamp. And this time I'm going to come in with a Misty Moonlight color. I love this blue. I really do. It's just a great intensity. It's one that I think works well with flowers. It's great also for masculine cards. And I'm just checking to make sure that I'm inking this up pretty well. And I'm sort of going to start filling in the blanks. So as I'm looking at this, remember, you want to keep the white open, the white kind of open in each of the corners. You want to orient it so the flowers can be in any direction. And I'm going to pop in a blue flower right there. And the fact that that blue flower is going over the pink, I don't care. It's fine. In fact, it will make the design look even more intentional. And then I might come over here and say, all right, I'll put in another blue one, maybe right in here. And I'm really trying not to overthink this. And then I'll do one kind of, I don't know, let's do it sort of right there, right along that horizontal line. That looks pretty good. And for right now, I'm going to leave that, I say. No, I'm not, because I want to do one more blue right up in here, just because that will make me happy. And I'll bring it a little bit over to the side, so it's not right up the center of the page. Okay, now I'm happy with that. So again, you can see that the concentration of the images is right along the center, not dead along the center, but you can see that it's going along the center. The next image that I'm going to use is still from the Flowing Flowers, and it's a really cute grouping of 3 flowers and then some nice little dots. And for this one, I'm using Gorgeous Grape. Just making sure, like on the other ones, that I have a really nice inking. And because I'm going to cluster these ones, I'm going to make sure that as I'm doing this, I am orienting the stamp in several different ways if those images are going to be stamped together. And you can see that I really don't care if I am stamping over what I've already done. And I'm not thinking through this. I'm not doing anything except kind of looking at where are there areas that could have more. And yeah, why not? Put that one right there. All right. And I think I might do one more to sort of fill that area in. Okay. All right, that's pretty good enough for the first step. So let me bring in the one that I showed you before I started stamping. I'm going to turn it, this one like this, and this one like this. And you'll see that they are similar, sort of, but they are definitely different in terms of where things are placed. And that's what you're going to get every single time. So now you're probably wondering, okay, fine, and what do we do with this mess? Well, let me show you where we're going. I am going to bring in 4 cards that I have made with this technique. They are not complicated cards. I'm going to talk and walk you through how you can do things more complicated than these. But using exactly what I just did, I made 4 cards. This is one of them. This is another. This is another. And this is the 4th. So these 4 pieces came from an example of what I just did. And let me show you how this all works together. So if I put them back together in the orientation that I used when I did the stamping, kind of erase the the sentiments, the embellishments, the framed piece that is the Misty Moonlight, and just look at that pattern. And if you look at that pattern of stamping and you look at this pattern of stamping, you have a better idea of where we're going. But we're not done yet. This is kind of the end goal. We're at this step. So how do we go from here to here? Not mystical or magical. And this is where you're going to have a lot of freedom to do what you want to do. But the first thing that I would suggest is if you grab the paper that you have stamped, once you've stamped it, and you're going to do some more stamping, you're not done with that. So don't go crazy if you're not super happy and you don't think that everything is done yet. You're going to have an opportunity to fill in the blanks. Grab your paper trimmer and you're going to cut this piece into quarters, which obviously means on the 11-inch side, you're going to cut it at 5.5. And then on each of the two pieces that you now have, you're going to turn them to the 8.5-inch side and you're going to cut at 4.25. And at this point, you're going to end up with 4 quarter sheets that have some really cool patterns, and each one is going to look unique. So I'm just cutting these so that I will now have 4 pieces of paper that I have stamped. And each one is going to have a different pattern. I'm purposely not going to put these in a way that we can see that they were stamped together. And this will just show you that you're going to get 4 very different results, 4 different panels that you can use. And they're really pretty. But before we get done and before we say that we're ready to make cards, let me show you what I did on the final fronts that I made here. And I'm going to do the same thing on these. I added in a little bit of background, a little muted background, and I filled in some places with some kind of grungy stamps in the background and in between. You don't need to do this if you don't want to, but this is just me. So I'm just going to grab a couple of these. I'm not going to go through and show you all 4 because it's the exact same process. But let me just bring this one in as an example. And at this point, I can sort of start to decide, do I want this to be a portrait card? Maybe this way, maybe this way. Do I want it to be a landscape card? You know, which way do I want things to go? And I'll probably make this one into a portrait card in the view that's shown here. But I'm not quite done with that background. So what I'm going to do is I went through my stash and I found a couple of stamp sets that had some grungy pieces in it. Let me just get that phone unplugged. My apologies that I didn't do that beforehand. I found some grungy images. Painted Poppies have some really cool ones. Colored Contour has a really nice one as well. And I pulled those out. And I'm going to show you what I did. And this is just an idea because at this point, this is a blank canvas for you to use. I got Highland Heather, a little bit more subtle than the Gorgeous Grape. And from the Painted Poppies, I pulled out this stamp. And I'm going to ink it up and then I'm going to stamp it off. And I'm just going to come in and add in a little bit of a background. It is so subtle that I'm not sure it's showing up incredibly well on camera. I will bring it closer to the camera in just a second, but it adds a really cool kind of background, just interest, where it doesn't look like the design necessarily ends right at the end of the flower. So you can kind of see, let me put that up like that. You can kind of see that it has a really nice, just subtleness to it. So I started adding that, and then I got in the mood to add a little bit of grunge. And you know how much I like grunge. So I picked this stamp out of the color and contours, and I wanted to bring in another blue that would work well with the misty moonlight. And just did the same thing. I kind of stamped off and then came in and added just a few little pops of blue. And it really, in my opinion, adds some really cool ink texture to the end result. And I'm trying to get this so that it's a good picture on camera, and it's kind of hard, but you can see that it just has a really nice soft background by adding that. But do what you like. Another great way to add some texture would be to put the piece through an embossing folder and get some really nice background to it as well. I'm just pulling out another of the ones that I just created, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to come in and just add a little bit more interest into the edges of the design so that it's not as harsh. It blends a little bit better and gives a little bit more of a kind of a subtle feel in the background. And I'll do the same thing with the blue grunge. And you can see I'm not thinking about it. I'm really just sort of going for it and allowing the ink to do its thing. And you can see that this one's a little bit more bold. And you can do whatever makes you happy. You can also, if you look at these pieces and you're thinking, I really wish that I had put purple flowers maybe tucked right over here in the corner. Well, you can still do that. If I wanted to add a little bit of that purple flower stamp that I used when I was creating the piece to begin with, I can do that now. And I can make each piece a little bit unique if I want to. So I'm just going to go back and I'll do that. I'm grabbing the Gorgeous Grape and I'll just come in and give that a little bit of an edge. Now it has a little bit more character. Maybe I want to do the same thing right up in the corner. So I can touch this up and I can do whatever it is that I want to. That's the beauty of this as well, because you start with 4 individual panels and then you have the option to go back and change them as you would like them. I'm happy enough with how these look. I say that, and then I think, I do want to add a little bit of purple right in here. So I guess I'm really not happy enough. I will go back and do that really quickly. I'm going to grab the Gorgeous Grape one more time, and then I'm going to move on to finishing these off. And I'm just going to add a little bit right in the corner. Yeah, I like that. That now sort of finishes it all off. And while I'm there, just a teeny tad right in the corner at the bottom as well. So we've got 2 panels, and I would do the exact same thing on the other 2 and end up with 4 panels that I really like that are going to be my card fronts. But I do have one more thing that I need to do to the panels before I can put them onto my cards. And let me show you what I mean by that. Let me bring back one of the ones that I finished. If you notice, this card is an A2 size, but the front panel is cut down because these panels right now are 5.5 by 4.25. The panel that I put onto the front is actually 4 by 5.25. I made it a little shorter and a little narrower than the actual card base. my card base, and I have 4 of them cut out because I have 4 fronts that I can use. I cut these out of basic white, and I did use thick cardstock. I like the thick cardstock for these. And this is a regular old A2 card base. It measures 8.5 by 5.5 on the 8.5-inch side. I scored at 4 1/4. Just grabbing my bone folder. I'm going to give that a little bit of a push. And then I did cut out some color cardstock on the examples that I showed you a little bit earlier. The color cardstock is the Misty Moonlight, and I thought it really brought out the ink of the largest flower in the design. I decided to change it up a little bit and see how I like using Highland Heather. So I'm going to use Highland Heather on these and see how I like them. And the frames are cut a little bit narrower and shorter than the card base. These are 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. So 4 1/8, 5 3/8. So they're a little bit inside the frame of the card base itself. And now I need to trim the front piece just a tad. And you can choose, obviously, what side you trim when you trim off your front pieces. I'm going to trim the sides that have the white showing. So I'm going to trim on this side to get to 4 inches. So I'm going to put this into my paper trimmer at 4. I'm just going to take off a little bit there. And then I'm going to turn this to 5 1/4. And I'm trimming on the side that has the white. And I'm going to trim that off. And then I will be left with a panel that is a little bit narrower and a little bit shorter than the frame that I'm going to use. As you can see, when I put this all together, and I'm not going to do this quite yet, I'm going to have really 3 different layers of color that will work. And I do like that Highland Heather. I think that's kind of pretty. I am going to stamp a sentiment up in this case, this is going to be landscape. So I will stamp the sentiment in the upper right-hand corner. And I think I'm going to use the Misty Moonlight. I want to bring that blue out a little bit more. And when I do that, I may find that I want to add a little bit of Misty Moonlight somewhere in the design. So this is sort of a work in process. I have already put my stamps that I'm going to use into my Stamparatus. And I have used the Stamparatus for another project. And I just left the stamps in the Stamparatus. And it's kind of interesting. They're in a position that was for the other project, but this will be fine. I'll be able to make it work. I need birthday cards, so I'm going to make this a birthday card. Now, I've left my stamp in here, and I'm just going to figure out where I want my paper to be. So I'm just kind of winging this. Let's see, where do I want it? Yeah, that's probably good enough. And then I'm going to straighten out my paper because I know that I have my sentiment straight. And I'll just peek one more time before I commit to stamping. That looks pretty good. And I'm going to use that Misty Moonlight to add the sentiment. The sentiment stamps that come in the Flowing Flowers stamp set they're great. They're forgiving. For example, this happy birthday is not a perfectly straight sentiment. It's not like the birthday is a little bit lower than the happy, and it's intentionally done that way, but it's nice because you don't have to be perfect when you're stamping this onto your project, and it still looks fabulous. All right, so I've got my happy birthday all set. Let me get this out of the way. And now I've got an opportunity to do one final check to see, do I want to add a little bit of that misty moonlight in the background to pull that color in? And I'm going to try it. This is where we're just going to experiment. I just used the dot stamp that I had used with the balmy blue, and I'm adding, actually I think this is working okay because I'm not going to add a lot. I'm inking off and just putting a couple of strategically placed blue. Now the blues sort of all blend together and in my crazy mind look a little bit more balanced. So that's going to be the front of the card that I'm going to put together. And just so this is not super distracting as I put this together, I'm going to get a clean piece of cardstock. That's going to make me focus a little bit more. So I think you might be able to see that a little bit better now too. That's kind of the panel that I'm going to end up with. And the rest of this is super simple, or it can be more complicated. I'm going to make these really simple. For me, these are going to be pretty much one layer cards with some embellishment going on the top. Obviously, do what you want. Grab some dies, get your embossing folders, get your ribbon and other bling, and make it yours. This is where your style is really going to come out and get showcased in cards like this. But I'm going to make it super simple. I am just going to put that focal point onto my frame. And then I'm going to put the frame right down on the card base. And this is going to be a very simple, but a very unique, and I think rather striking birthday card. And we're going to finish it up with a little bit of bling in just a second. I'm just going to put that right on the top of the card base. And this is a pretty substantial card because it does have that thick whisper white as the starting point, and then a couple of really nice layers going on the top. And I don't know if this is projecting incredibly well on the camera, but the colors and the flowers and just the whole texture, I think works together very well. Now I've got some bling, and I'm going to add a little bit of bling on here. I have, these are the Pastel Pearls, very fun colors. And these are gorgeous grape. These are Highland Heather. I think these are balmy blue, but I could be wrong. And they work really well with the colors that I've chosen. And I'm not going to go nutty with the embellishments, but just add a couple because I want to. And I want to bring out the color. I'll put a Highland Heather strategically placed. And then I'm going to grab a rhinestone jewel because I think silver and purple work really well together. And what else do I want to do? I'll do a lighter one, a lighter pastel. Put that up toward the dark dot. And because I do like odd numbers when I'm done with the bling, I'll add a couple of the rhinestones and try not to get them so that they're in a pattern, but a little bit haphazard. I love this pick tool because you can, as I'm doing right now, you can figure out where you want things to go before you commit yourself to putting it down. And yeah, I think I don't know. Where do I want that? Oh, that's kind of fun. I'll put it right there. All right. So there is an example of a card from this technique, the one sheet wonder. And the one sheet wonder in this case is really making 4 panels out of one sheet of cardstock, plain cardstock, white, vanilla, crumb cake would look really nice. This would be a really great way if you have some masculine stamps, and leaves would be really pretty, or some things that are nautical that can be oriented in many different ways. And like we did, what you're going to do is start off with a sheet of paper and just stamp, and try to get your stamps vertically and horizontally sort of kind of in the middle. Group them, leave some white space, and then when you're done, you can cut out your panels. These are the ones that I did when we were stamping together. So here are 3 of them. And then after you've cut out your panels, like I did on this one, you have opportunity to add some background inking, or you might want to add some more stamps if there are holes in what you think you want on your panel. Give it a little bit of a trim, and then you can add it to a card base and a framed piece. You can orient them horizontally. You can make them so that they are portrait. You can bling them up. You can add ribbons and dies and all sorts of different embellishments to give them, many, many different looks. And it's just, I think, a really fun technique to make a group of cards in a pretty quick order with different colors. And it's almost like you're making your own designer series paper when you're creating these. So I hope you enjoy it. I would love to see what you make. And for those folks who are in our stamp group, this is a technique that would definitely be fun to do, and then put those cards into our challenge. So please share what you do, and I hope you enjoyed it.